May 25th, 1977 saw the release of George Lucas's Star Wars, which quickly became a surprise blockbuster hit. Often regarded as one of the greatest and most influential movies ever made, it helped change the way movies were made and captured the imagination of a generation. Star Wars quickly became a pop culture phenomenon. Over the course of this series, I will be joined by a number of Star Wars fans from across YouTube and the toy collecting community, as we take a look back at their earliest memories of Star Wars and find out what made Star Wars great. Hello Toy Collector fans, Universal Toy Collector here, and welcome to the channel. And welcome to episode 18 of What Made Star Wars Great, the series where I get to chat with like-minded people about Star Wars, finding out about their earliest interactions and experiences with Star Wars, and to also find out basically what made Star Wars great. And joining me for this episode is my good friend Gojitron. Hello sir, how are you?
Hi, Stu. How are things?
Oh, okay. Well, I'll be honest. This is round two for us, isn't it? Really, I had a bit of a mishap the other week, so
We weren't
appreciate.
supposed to mention that.
Well, we're not. I can always cut this out. It's not a problem. Not a problem. But thank you very much for coming back. So I do this episode because this series, to basically find out what made Star Wars great, to celebrate and talk about all the good things about Star Wars. But there has been a lot of negativity surrounding Star Wars. We had all the negativity regarding the sequels, the Acolyte, and you had Lucasfilm coming out and Disney coming out and attacking the fans. And just when you thought all that was dying down, John Boyega come out and he said what he said about Star Wars being like basically for whites, and white people didn't like the fact that black people were in it, or they didn't like them as being as heroes. They're okay as the sidekick and stuff like that. I mean, what are your thoughts on all the negativity across the whole of Star Wars? Is it just?
In some cases, yes. In some cases, no. I mean, I take every project, I look at it individually, what's good and what's bad. And when it's good, I'll say it's good. I'll like it. And when it's bad, it's bad. It's like,
Mm,
first two seasons of Mandalorian, good. Third
yeah,
season and Book of Boba Fett, not so good. So, yes, it's okay to criticize when something is not good. But I think there's a lot of rage baiting going on in the communities because as I said to you before, outrage is coin of the realm on YouTube and social media. So we have some channels kind of whipping fans up into a frenzy, overstating things when they're bad just to get the views and the clicks.
yeah,
And then on the other
yeah,
side, we have Disney and some creators being disingenuous when it comes to the criticism, not taking criticism on the surface and saying, "Oh, it's motivated by this, that, or the other," rather than just the product, which is, I'm sure in some cases there, in every community, it's a little microcosm of humanity itself. So I'm sure among
yeah,
Star Wars fans there are racists and bigots and misogynists and what have you. But those people were going to be like that whether they watched Star Wars or whether they didn't watch Star Wars.
yeah,
So let's
yeah.
not paint the entire fan base with a broad brush because of a few loud negative voices.
No,
And I think Disney and the creators need to sort of get away from doing that and painting us all with the same brush and really looking at valid criticism of their products and trying to improve rather than just brushing it off and saying, "Oh, you don't like this because you're a bigot or whatever."
yeah,
Because in a lot of cases, that's not true.
no, absolutely. And what do you think about, you know, say for example, I mean, because there's a lot of Star Wars out there. You're not going to like everything, but these people coming out saying you're not a true Star Wars fan if you don't like everything about Star Wars. I mean, I've had it today. There was a comment on a Facebook group, and I just had a little chuckle. I replied and said, so basically, what you're saying is, which is very childish and quite dickish, to be honest with you, that because I don't like certain Star Wars movies or certain Star Wars TV series, you don't class me as a true Star Wars fan, even though I grew up in the era of the original trilogy. So 1977, I'd have been 3 or 4 years old. I've grown up with Star Wars, but because I don't like certain aspects of Star Wars, I'm not a true Star Wars fan. I mean, that's the most ridiculous thing ever. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, people get, in this day and age, people get so wrapped up in the things they love and they sort of, you know, attach their identities to what they like, whether it's movies, television, toys, whatever. And when people criticize those things, they take it personally, which is silly. That's a failing on their part. You can like something and I can dislike the same thing, it doesn't put us at odds with each other. It means we have
Yeah,
different tastes because we're all individuals. So no matter if you like Star Wars from 1977 or 2025, you like what you like and it's fine. There's no true fan or false fan. It's, when franchises go on for this long, whether it's Star Wars or Marvel or DC or Godzilla, anything, there's going to be ebbs and flows. There's going to be highs and lows, and you're not going to like everything when there's this huge amount of product being put out. So it's
yeah.
okay to like one aspect and not the other. It doesn't make you any less of a fan. I think we have to
No,
stop identifying ourselves by what we like and, more on, what we individuals bring to the conversation.
yeah.
Know what I mean? Does that
No,
make sense?
yeah, it does, absolutely, absolutely. And I just one last point on the negativity. A lot of fans are being criticised or attacked for being so, like, bigots and racists and stuff like that, misogynists and stuff.
Mhm.
But I think, like you say, they're painting everybody with the same brush. Why is it not that you can have constructive criticism on very valid points that a TV series or a movie isn't very good, but the actors or the film company come out and attack the fans and saying they're bigots, and why is that? Why can't they just accept the criticism for what it is? We're not attacking the majority of the fans, I would say, aren't attacking the actors for whether they're like um identify as a
Mhm.
different gender or if they're a different skin color. We're not attacking those those actors. You know, we're attacking the story, the elements of the film which aren't very good. Why is it not that Disney or Lucasfilm or the actors can take that criticism as constructive criticism?
Well, as you know, in social media, the most negative voices are the loudest, and they're the ones climbing up to the top of the hill and shouting their displeasure at everything. So the negative voices kind of tilt social media in one way, where the vast
Yeah,
majority of fans who are just watching something and enjoying something aren't saying anything. They're just enjoying it for what it is. So those negative voices kind of become the loudest, and then that gets the attention of the creators, and they respond in kind, not stopping to think, okay, this does not represent the majority. This is just a small portion. Because I said to you before, there's two extremes on either end. There's the people like you said saying, "Oh, everything Star Wars is great. You must like everything Star Wars." Then there's the other end saying everything Star Wars is rubbish. And then there's the vast majority of us in the middle who
yeah,
are picking and choosing and just liking what we like and going along and not bothering anyone. But it
yeah,
seems to be those two extremes that seem to get the most attention on social media.
yeah. And I'll just say it outright, the fans in the middle are the rational fans.
Right.
We're the ones, we have a voice, but when we speak, we don't get heard
Mhm.
because you've got the racists on one side, and then you've got the wokey dokies on the other side, and they're so tunnel visioned in their beliefs and stuff like that that they don't listen to anything rational. So
Mhm.
in the end, the rational fan just gives up and says, "Well, what's the point of saying anything? Because I'm not going to get heard." You're
Right.
too focused on your ideas and your ways of thinking, and it's the same with the guys on the other side as well. So
I compare it to, like, when, people write reviews about restaurants they've gone to. If you go to a
yeah,
restaurant and you have a nice meal and the food is good, the service is good, you're content, you go home, you say, "Oh, that was a nice meal, we'll go back there someday." If you go someplace and you have a negative experience, if the steak is overcooked, if there's a fly in your soup, if the service is slow, you wanna
yeah,
go and climb to the highest mountaintop and scream your displeasure to the world and let them know that this place offended you. So that's what I compare fandom to. When you're pissed off about something, you wanna scream and let everyone know it, but when you're content, you just kind of you're content. You don't
yeah.
have to run out and tell everyone.
Do you feel that, say, Disney and Lucasfilm should take some responsibility for the way things are at the moment with the fandoms? Because I mean, they were certainly stoking the fires after the Acolyte, and that's not. And
Yeah,
to me,
yeah.
that's wrong. I mean, I've never ever heard of actors coming out and attacking fans or a film company or a film studio the way Disney and Kathleen Kennedy did over at Lucasfilm. I've never really heard anything like that until that happened.
Yeah, I mean, they should take responsibility for the product itself. They should focus
Right.
on, is this product good or bad? They see the ratings, they see the viewing numbers, they see how the merchandise is selling. They should be able to look at the hard numbers and say, okay, this worked, this didn't. As far as all other nonsense on social media, I have no idea. Do you want them to put gag orders on the creators and the actors, or do you want them to be free to go out and say what they want and then face the consequences? As what's her name, Cara Dune,
Yeah,
Gina,
yeah,
Gina
yeah.
Carano, as
Gina
Gina
Carano, yeah.
Carano did. She said something on social media, and Disney retaliated. So I don't think we want to live in a world where free speech is stifled. If that's how these actors and creators feel, so be it. Whether they're wrong or right, they have the right to say it. I think Disney themselves, Lucasfilm, Kathleen Kennedy should focus on the product itself. Are we putting out a good product that people want to watch? That should be their focus.
Yeah.
Because I'm not sure why they would want to continue to put out products that people don't want to watch. It seems counterproductive to spend millions of dollars on something that is not going to be watched, viewed, is not going to sell merchandise, because that's one of the biggest parts of Star Wars is the merchandise.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can go to Walmart now and the pegs are still clogged with Acolyte figures. So that tells you what the popularity of that show was.
Yeah.
If no one wants the product, that means they didn't like the show.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, do you when we just quickly touch on that with the Star Wars figures and stuff like that. Do you think Hasbro overdo it with certain figures? I mean, you've got like a lot of
I
Landos
I
that are
I
shelf
don't know the
filling.
particulars of the contract. So,
Right.
Hasbro might sign this contract with Disney, Lucasfilm, Marvel, whoever, and there must be a stipulation in there that says you have to make X amount of product to promote our show. I'm assuming that's how it works. So they may be beholden to whatever the contractual obligations are with regards to the merchandise.
Yeah. Okay. Fair dues. Fair dues. Enough of the negativity. Let's try and focus on the positive side of Star Wars. So, what were your earliest memories of Star Wars?
So I was 10 years old in 1977. So I was old enough to know a world before Star Wars and after
Yep.
Star Wars. And before Star Wars, science fiction, I wouldn't say it was bland, but it was a certain type of science fiction like Star
Yeah.
Trek and
Yeah.
Planet of the Apes and things like that. And then, as far as other things I watched, like the old Batman series, Hanna-Barbera cartoons on Saturday morning, nothing was like Star Wars. So Star Wars was a game changer. It was a watershed moment in pop culture. When that came out, in many ways to me it was a revelation because I have never seen anything like that before. I mean, I wasn't familiar with the old science fiction serials from the 1930s, things like that. A lot of things that Lucas pulled from when he was making Star Wars, like
Yeah.
the old Flash Gordon serials. I wasn't familiar with things like that. So that type of storytelling was sort of new to me, and it was a revelation to me. I loved it.
Yeah. Cool, cool. And so when you were in the theater and the credits went up or the scroll went up, then the big Star Destroyer went over. I mean, what were your thoughts then? I mean, can you remember being in that moment with watching that first
I mean, I
opening
don't think I
scene?
can remember that specific moment, but I know I
Yeah.
saw the film 3 times in theaters, and I loved it. And, as soon as the toys were released by Kenner, I had to have them. So, yeah, it made a
Yeah.
big impression on me, and I started reading the, Marvel comic right away because at that time, kids read comics, and I was one
Yeah.
of those kids that read comics. So, that Star Wars Marvel comic sort of kept the fires burning in between films.
So, I mean, were the Star Wars comics quite popular back then?
Oh, yeah, I think everything Star Wars was quite popular back then, and, I
Yeah.
really loved the first couple of years of comics between Star Wars and Empire, because at that time, the lore had not been cemented yet by
Right.
George,
Yeah.
and the creators in the Marvel comic had a little bit of freedom to tell different stories. There were certain rules that they couldn't touch this or that. But that was really the Wild West of Star Wars storytelling. There was a lot of crazy stuff in that early Marvel comic run that I really enjoyed that didn't really carry over once George started cementing the lore in his version of
Okay.
the mythology.
Yeah. Yeah. And when Star Wars had finished, did you ever think to yourself, there could be a sequel to this, or did you think that was it, one and done?
Oh, I wasn't even sure. I wasn't even thinking in terms of sequels back then because it really
No?
wasn't a thing for the most part.
Yeah.
When you're 10 years old and you see a movie, you just enjoy the movie. You're not thinking like we are today, where a sequel is a thing. Back then, it really wasn't a thing. Sequels and
Okay, okay.
franchises were very rare.
Yeah. I suppose the only thing with sequels and stuff like that would have been sort of like Planet of the Apes at the
Planet of the
time.
Apes, yeah, it was a film
Yeah, yeah,
series and not
yeah.
much beyond that.
No, wow, wow. So then 3 years later, Empire Strikes Back came out. So what were your expectations of that after seeing Star Wars? You thinking, "Oh god, there's a sequel. Great."
Well, I was excited because I think we saw the toys first.
Okay.
So I was looking at these toys saying, "Who's this? Who's that?" And then seeing it on screen, spectacular. Just seeing, starting off with the Battle of Hoth and the Walkers. I was like, "Whoa, what's this all about?" And then, of course, Dagobah and the introduction of Yoda, the bounty hunters, and then we get to Cloud City and the duel. It was just all very mind blowing. And I can
Yeah,
remember, sitting in the theater at the end of Darth and Luke's duel, where, Luke's lost his hand. There's the revelation about the father. Han's been frozen and taken away. And I say, oh my goodness, how are they going to resolve this before the end of the film? And guess what? They're not. And that was probably
yeah,
the longest 3 years of my life.
yeah, yeah. It would have been because, but then that set it up perfectly. So after that, after the Empire, you must have, surely thought, well, okay, we're going to be getting a sequel here because they can't leave this
Right.
unresolved.
hmm
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I
then,
think by
but
that
then,
time we knew the path it was going to take. I think by that time we knew it was going to be three films. And
right.
there was some talk about it being a series, of, three trilogies. I don't know if that came out around the time of
Seriously,
Empire
even
or
back
after
then,
Red Eye.
even back then.
Yeah, I remember back then, maybe after
Wow.
Jedi came out, we started hearing about George saying, there's gonna be 3 trilogies. This was when he was still ruminating about how he's going to go forward, and he didn't wanna take a break yet, so,
Yeah.
yeah, we kinda
Yeah.
knew the path it was going to take eventually.
Okay, that's interesting. I didn't realize it was sort of like rumored way back then as well. I
Yes.
thought that was,
Mhm,
wow, wow.
mhm,
So then 3 years go by, Return of the Jedi
mhm.
pops up at the theaters. What were your thoughts on that? And again, what were your expectations? Because for me, I think Empire was the best film of the trilogy. That's my
Oh,
personal
absolutely.
opinion. So my, expectations would have been quite high, I would have thought.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember seeing it opening weekends, lines out the door. We had to, buy tickets in advance and then go back for the showing. Very hotly anticipated. Uh, I liked it, but not as much as Empire. Obviously, I thought,
Yeah.
they wrapped everything up in the first sequence of the film. They found Han. They took care of Jabba. Luke's a Jedi now. We didn't see his training, but he comes back. He's a Jedi now, and that was a little jarring between films, seeing Luke in the state he was at the end of Empire. Then he comes into Jedi, and he's a fully formed Jedi Knight now. And how did that
Yeah.
happen? You know, and then later on, I thought the Ewoks were a bit silly,
Yeah.
but the duel at the end was good. The redemption of Darth Vader, that was a nice story arc. So
Mm.
yeah, I enjoyed the film, not as much as Empire, but it was good.
Yeah. I feel, and I've said this like on a number of occasions, that I think Return of the Jedi missed Gary Kurtz because I thought he was pivotal within Star Wars and The Empire Strikes Back. He was the producer.
Mhm,
He'd worked with George Lucas previously, and I, I think there was a difference of opinion
mhm.
or creative um, um, conflict or something between the two of
Right,
them,
right.
and that's why he got someone else in, and then of course he had Richard Marquand as the director.
Mhm,
I think originally he wanted Steven Spielberg, but because after Empire Strikes Back, Lucas incurred a load of fines, excuse me, because of um, because he didn't have any of the credits at the front beginning of the film. They're all at
mhm.
the end. So he got fined for that. So then he come out of the Directors Guild, wanted Steven Spielberg, but Spielberg was still in the Directors Guild, so he couldn't do it. So he got Richard Marquand. So I mean, as much as I like Return of the Jedi, it would have been interesting to see how different it would have been if Kurtz had have been there, if they'd have gone along with killing off Han Solo, because then that would have been quite a dark, opening
Right.
to the movie.
Mhm.
And then that would have left people on their seats thinking, "Crikey, if they've killed off Han, who's gonna be next? Luke?
Mhm.
Leia?" You just don't know. I mean, thoughts?
I think they made the right decision to not kill Han. I think after the
Okay.
3 films, everyone wanted to see the heroes win the day and have a happy ending. I don't think we
Yeah,
wanna end on a down note like Han
yeah,
dying. But as far as some of the other aspects of the film, I think George is best when he has someone that pushes back against some of his, stranger ideas.
yeah,
Because as we've seen, as he went on and got more creative control of the franchise, the special editions are a great example.
yeah,
He wanted to do it. He felt good doing it. Most fans don't like the majority of that. And looking back at it now, that CGI is extremely dated and does not look good at all. And I think a lot of those changes were completely unnecessary.
yeah, yeah,
So George
yeah,
George is best when he has, a back and forth with someone. When he has total creative control, he makes some questionable decisions.
yeah. I mean, when he went back to do, the special editions and stuff like that, and I kinda get why he did it, because even when he did Star Wars, he wasn't happy with the cantina scene.
Mhm.
He was saying it wasn't how he wanted it to look. He wanted it to look a certain way. And then, when the technology came round after Jurassic Park with the CGI and stuff like that, he thought, great, I can now go back and do the movies and do them how I wanted to do them. And like you say, the CGI is dated. It was, early days of CGI, but I just don't think it fitted in with the film.
Right.
So,
Yeah, it
some of
was
those scenes, I mean, the Jabba scene, I just wish they'd have left that there.
right. Seeing stop
Left
motion,
out rather, should I say. Yeah,
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 seeing puppets and stop motion next to that late '90s CGI, it just didn't mix. And
yeah,
if George wants to go back and tinker with his films, that's fine. He's the creator, but don't completely remove the original version so that people can't watch them anymore. That's the sticking point with the special editions. Why can't we have both versions available?
Was that
Right?
something to do with his ex-wife, Marsha?
I have no idea what the
I
reasoning is.
I I think because she edited it, then he would have had to give us some sort of like payment if he re-released it or something like that. So
Okay, well, it's
I'm not
Star Wars.
100% sure.
He's swimming in money. Give her the payment. You know, why deprive the
Yeah.
fans because you don't want to part with a portion of your billions of dollars?
Well, there you are, there you are. But I mean, I don't know if I'm 100% correct on that. It's just what I've heard. So
Well,
we'll
whatever the
see.
reason was, it was a bad decision. We
Yeah,
should be able to
yeah.
watch the
I mean,
originals as we saw them when we were kids.
I mean, he went back. He cleaned up a lot of the Empire Strikes Back as well, and he cleaned up a lot of A New Hope. I mean, the space battle at the end of in the first battle, Death Star battle. I didn't think that looked too bad. I thought that was okay. They kind of cleaned that up. That looked okay. Certain elements in Empire Strikes Back they cleaned up where you could see through the side bits on the cockpit of the snow speeder. So they cleaned that up, which I thought was cool. But in Return of the Jedi, you had all those banthas walking in before you see the sail barge. Was there any point in having that?
Right.
Extra scenes in of Tatooine. They made Bespin look a lot bigger, which do you know what? I didn't mind that so much,
Mhm.
but I think the Jabba scene was just I didn't like that at all. I wish he hadn't put that
The one in A New Hope you're talking about?
in A New Hope. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that doesn't look
yeah.
good at all. And
No,
then the little parts with the CGI droids in Mos Eisley and things like that on the
yeah,
Rontos, that none of that stuff fits.
no,
But like I
no,
said, it's his film to tinker with, but don't
yeah,
deprive fans of the original version because
no,
I grew up watching, stop motion puppets and
yeah,
marionettes and guys in rubber suits.
yeah.
Star Wars compared to that stuff was, groundbreaking. So no matter what George thinks of how it looked then, it looked great to us, and that's our childhood
Well, yeah, that's
memories.
what I mean, I don't know what he was expecting. I don't know what he was the look he was going for. I
Mhm,
I really don't, because I thought that cantina scene worked absolutely perfectly, but
mhm.
he wasn't happy
Yeah,
with it.
it's
So
iconic.
yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So because the CGI came about, the technology for CGI came about, he then decided to go on and make the prequels, the Phantom Menace. again, new Star Wars not been out for a while. I think it was a 10, 11 years since, Jedi. I think Jedi was 83, wasn't it? So it would have been, yeah, when did Phantom Menace come out? Was it 97?
90, 98, 99. I thought.
So oh, in 99, that's it, yeah. So it's a few years between the 2,
Mhm.
or the films. What were your thoughts when, Jedi came out? Not Jedi, bloody hell, Phantom Menace, I'm having a mare.
Phantom Menace. I mean, everyone was excited to see Star Wars come back, and we definitely saw the toys ahead of time because
Yeah,
Hasbro just flooded Phantom Menace toys into every single store. I mean, you could go walk into a Toys R Us, and the whole front of the store, I remember they had a midnight opening when the toys were released,
yeah,
and people were lined up for a half mile to get in Toys R Us and get these new Star Wars toys for the first time and see all the new characters. The hype was unreal. And then when we saw the movie, eh, I mean, it
yeah,
wasn't
yeah, yeah,
I don't know what people were expecting, but I don't think they were expecting, you know, what we got. I mean,
yeah,
certain parts of it, Darth Maul was great, the Duel of the Fates, Liam Neeson and Ewan McGregor were fantastic. I thought, not Jake Lloyd's fault, but I thought the way they played Anakin was a little too upbeat for the kid that was going to grow up and try to conquer the galaxy. I think little Anakin should have been maybe a little more stoic to
yeah,
kind of, preview the path he's going to go on. I didn't like his characterization in that. Making Padme so much older than him and then putting it in a romance later on was a little bit weird.
yeah,
Uh, you know, Pod racing scene was great, but him in the fighter at the end, being led up to the droid control ship and that whole
yeah,
sequence was a bit silly.
yeah, yeah,
Very uneven film, but like I said, when Lucas has total creative control and no one to rein in his instincts, like Jar Jar and the Gungans being a perfect example, that didn't work for a lot of people.
yeah.
You get a very uneven product, and I think that's the prequel trilogy all the way through is a very uneven product.
Oh, seriously, even I mean, for me, I watched it and I was like, "Oh, okay, it's a little bit boring. It's not as exciting as the original Star Wars. It's not got the well." But then again, it was the first movie, wasn't it? The new trilogy. So I liked certain aspects, like you say. I liked the pod racing. I
Mhm.
liked Darth Maul. I thought he was great, and they shouldn't have killed him off. Although at that time we thought he was killed off, but they brought him back.
Yeah, he's fine.
Um,
Just a flesh
Yeah,
wound.
yeah, just a flesh wound, yeah, yeah. But I mean, it was a lot of to do with the trade, um, blockade and the trade routes being
Right.
blocked and stuff like that, wasn't it? And do you know what I mean? And I'm not being funny, but what kid wants to sit and listen to that kind of stuff when
Mm,
when you watch a Star Wars movie, you know? And then Attack of the Clones, that I can appreciate it now because of the Clone Wars series that they've done, but I just thought it was too over reliant on CGI. That
right.
kind of ruined it for me, and I wasn't keen on that droid scene where, um, what's his name, 3PO is flying around that droid factory,
Yeah.
and I've just
Yeah, that's
it's
part of that
just
silliness that didn't
yeah,
belong.
yeah. It's like Irvin Kershner hit the nail on the head, with Empire Strikes Back. Um, um, he wanted to have humor in Empire Strikes Back, but he didn't want it to be a comedy.
Right.
He wanted to have like a love scene in it and stuff like that, but he didn't want it to be a gushy love movie, a
Mhm.
romantic movie. Do you know what I mean? So Kirshner hit it on the head. I think there was just too much slapstick within the prequel trilogies,
Exactly. Yeah, the humor was
especially with
forced.
yeah, 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 with Jar Jar, and then that scene with C-3PO in
Mhm.
Attack of the Clones.
Yeah, another big problem I think with the prequels was that the droid army was a bit rubbish, wasn't it? Those battle droids, a Jedi could just force push them and they'd fall apart. It's
Yeah,
not really a
yeah,
challenge for any of the Jedi. When you have that big battle scene in the Geonosis arena, all those Jedi, there's no doubt who's going to come out ahead in that because the
yeah,
battle droids were so terrible.
yeah. What would you have preferred to have seen instead of battle droids?
I mean, the battle droids, the concept of battle droids is fine. Just make them
Yeah,
more intimidating, like where the Dark Troopers in the Mandalorian
yeah,
and then
yeah,
the
yeah.
second season
True.
finale. Those are intimidating droids.
Yeah,
Those would make a proper threat to a Jedi in battle.
Yeah.
But those skinny little battle droids they designed for the prequels, they just didn't look intimidating at all. They had those stupid duck faces and whatnot.
Yeah. The voices got me as well.
Right.
The voices
Roger,
got me. I
roger.
mean, yeah, yeah, exactly. It's just a I don't know. It just the thing I can appreciate. I mean, I know that at the time the movies weren't very well received. You know, there was a lot of a fair bit of backlash. But I mean, Django Fett again. A great character, but he wasn't in it for very long, was he?
Yeah.
He sort of like, but there you are. And
One of
then
the
you
other
had
things that didn't work for
oh,
me in the prequels was the love story. I just couldn't see why Padme would fall in love with Anakin. He's petulant, he's moody, in the Attack of the Clones when he comes back and he says, "Oh, I
yeah,
killed them all, the women, the children, I killed them all." And her response to that is, "Oh, I love you." I mean, what? Do you not is that not a red flag for you?
yeah,
It
yeah,
just the
yeah.
love story just didn't
It,
work for me.
it's I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think you're right. He needed someone to push back against him, and for me, Gary Kurtz was that man. I don't think Rick McCallum was because he was the producer all the way through the prequel trilogy. So he's sort of like known as a yes man sort of thing.
Right,
I
exactly. I
mean,
mean, by that time, George has enough influence and power and money that he can just surround himself with the yes men and do what he wants.
yeah, yeah.
In the
I mean,
early
which
days, he
is a
didn't have that
shame.
luxury because in the early days, he was trying to hold on to the property and keep from selling it to 20th Century Fox because he was in some financial trouble here and there.
Yeah.
He was really trying to hold on to ownership of Star Wars in the early days, so he needed people to come in and work with him to make sure that happened, but once it took off the way it did, the sky's the limit for him. He doesn't need anyone.
Do you do you think that was a mistake on his part?
Not selling it to 20th Century Fox, you mean?
Well, no, no, just not keeping himself surrounded by people that are
Oh,
gonna
yeah.
not say yes to you all the time, you know?
Yes. Yeah, that was a
Yeah,
mistake. Yeah.
yeah. And then, like, obviously, we had, like, Revenge of the Sith. I didn't mind that film. I thought it was okay. And when I first watched it, I thought, "Crikey, Anakin succumbed to the dark side quite quickly." But then, you know, looking at it over a period of time and then looking at the Clone Wars series, you realize just how, um, Palpatine seduced him all over all those years.
Right.
It started from the very first movie. We just didn't see it. It's like, I've got to keep an eye on you, check your progress and stuff like that. It starts there, but you
Mhm.
just think it as like an off, oh, haha, it's like a funny kind of comment sort of thing. But then
Right.
again, when you watch it and then you listen to him speaking to Anakin through um, Attack of the Clones, then you listen to his conversations with him during the Clone Wars series, then what he says to him in Revenge of the Sith, you think, my God, this guy's just got his fingers in him, but we don't see it. And I thought Ian McDermott played that part really, really well. So there were
Mhm.
some positive
Yeah.
things to come out of the movies.
It works better when you have the context of the Clone Wars animated series because
Yeah,
they had
definitely.
so much time to build up. But just looking
Yeah,
at just the films by themselves,
yeah,
like I was saying, between Empire and Jedi, Luke became a Jedi. How did that happen? We didn't see it. And it's the same thing with the prequel when you don't have the context of the animated series. It's like
yeah,
and it looks like Anakin was seduced very quickly, but in reality, there was an amount of time in between those films where it happens with gradual manipulation, but you don't just see
yeah.
that in the context of the films.
Yeah. With the original trilogy, did they not have like comic books? Like you say, you had the comic books and stuff like that. So weren't they? I guess they weren't classed as canon then. So you had like, was there anything like comic wise between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi?
Oh, yeah, but there were really no stories that would contradict anything that George was going to do in the films. So there wasn't any
Right,
buildup between films in the comics.
right,
It
okay,
was just all these different serialized stories that the comic book writers would come up with independently. Like I said, there was
right,
just certain rules that they couldn't do this or that or the other.
yeah,
Like they couldn't have a I think one of the rules is they couldn't have an actual confrontation between Luke and Vader in the comics before Empire Strikes Back because then that would ruin that moment. But other than those certain rules, they could do whatever they wanted.
yeah,
But
yeah.
they weren't
No,
going to
fair enough.
affect the films either way.
Yeah. So when um Revenge of the Sith was done and dusted. That was it. Did you think that was it for Star Wars, or was you still, because like going on back on what George Lucas said about a trilogy of trilogies, did you expect there to be another 3 films, or
I mean,
was that
who
it for you?
who knew at that point? I expected there to be another 3 at some point
Yeah,
because there was but, who knows when because there was so much time between the original trilogy and the prequels. Would he
yeah.
do it now? Would he do it in 10 years? Would he hand off to someone? It was completely unknown at that point.
Well, he sold, um, Lucasfilm to
He
Disney.
sure did. He sure did.
He
For a
he
lot of
got a
money.
nice bit of money, but he did, he's doing
Mhm.
alright for himself. He's doing
Yeah,
alright. He's got himself a
he's
nice little
fine.
pad. But was you surprised at that?
No,
No?
no. Disney had already
Right.
bought Marvel at that point, right? I
Yeah,
believe.
yeah,
Yeah, so it came
yeah.
as no surprise that Disney was gobbling up all kinds of IP because it's what they do.
Mm.
At one point they had Power Rangers, then they sold it back, and they've been, they had cornered the quote unquote girls market with the Disney princesses,
Yeah.
but Disney was always looking for a way to get into the boys market. So that's where Marvel and Star Wars came in, and ironically, they've turned both into female fronted franchises. It's kind of
But
defeats the
yeah,
purpose
I
of
mean,
buying
it's
them in the first place.
but the thing is it didn't start off like that with Marvel, because I know we're talking about Star Wars, but
Mm,
with Marvel phases 1, 2, and 3, I thought were absolutely superb. I mean, there was a bit of an element of, like, girl power at the end of Endgame where, you see that shot of all the women and
yeah.
stuff like that, and but
We can
I
talk
don't
about the
know.
MCU in another conversation at some point, but there's a reason for that. You know, it,
Yeah,
Kevin Feige, Marvel's head, had to report to someone and a creative committee during
yeah,
the first part of that whole MCU run, and then he got autonomy from that, and this is where it sort of broke off. But that's a
yeah.
conversation for another day.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. So with Disney Star Wars then, I mean, they got off to a fairly decent start. You had, um, what's it called? The Force Awakens, which people turned around and said it was a rehash of Star Wars, just a modern day version of it and stuff like that. Because, what's his name? J.J. Abrams was, saying, well, the Phantom, not the Phantom Menace, the prequels,
Mhm.
you know, the fans told us that it wasn't like the original Star Wars, so they wanted it more Star Warsy. So he did that, and then he got accused of being too much like Star Wars and just a rehash. And then you got Rian Johnson come in to do The Last Jedi, who just listened to the fans because they said it was too much like the original Star Wars. So he just took it off in a totally different tangent, and God knows where he was going with that. And then you had J.J. Abrams come back and, yeah, tried to sort the mess out. I mean, look, a lot of people don't like Disney Star Wars. I'm not saying I hate it. There's certain bits of Disney Star Wars that I don't like, but there is some good stuff. The Force Awakens wasn't a bad film. It got off to a good start. Then you had Rogue One, which now is classed as an absolute fantastic film. After all the success of Andor and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So, I mean, what are your thoughts overall on the Disney Star Wars era?
Well, with the 3 films, the Skywalker saga, they obviously went in with no plan, at
Well,
least
yeah,
no
yeah,
plan
that
of
shows. Yeah,
succession between films. There was no, JJ just ended it with his, JJ and his damn mystery boxes. Yeah, I'm over that with him. So he ends it and hands it off to the next guy and says, "Here, do what you want." That was a mistake. They should have had an overall plan of how to
yeah,
tell a cohesive story, and they didn't.
yeah. No, exactly.
And there's
Yeah,
other particular aspects of that. I've told you before, the biggest problem for me with the sequel trilogy was that they had Mark and Harrison and Carrie for one film. They knew it was only going to be one film because they were killing Han Solo.
yeah,
And they had, I want to say, the audacity after all that buildup to not put them together. I mean, that's
yeah,
where the sequel trilogy lost me. You've had fans waiting 40 years to see these characters back on screen. You bring them out at conventions and say, hey, they're all back now, and you don't put them together. What a gut punch that was.
yeah.
And
Do
then,
you think
and then, we say, oh, maybe there's a chance they can bring Han back somehow, whatever. And then something I think doesn't get talked about enough in regards to the sequel trilogy, we had Carrie Fisher pass away
Yeah,
before Last Jedi came out.
yeah,
And that sort of cemented the idea that we're never going to see these characters on screen again. And I think that
yeah,
may have, consciously or subconsciously, colored people's opinions of the sequel trilogy at that point because they had that opportunity in The Force Awakens and they squandered it. And now they can never go back and fix that.
yeah. I mean, do you think JJ Abrams regrets not putting all 3 of them together?
I have no idea.
No?
No
I
idea.
mean,
Not really a J.J. Abrams fan.
and I've said before as well, Star Wars was in not a bad place after the prequel trilogy and the original trilogy. So it, in timeline scale, it finishes at Return of the Jedi. So Star Wars for me was in a good place. The foundation was there. How can Disney have got it so wrong in certain aspects when it comes to
Mhm.
the saga, the Skywalker saga? I mean, why go into a franchise like this? I've always been told fail to prepare, prepare to fail. And I think that's what they've done. Because, like you said,
Mhm.
there was no cohesion between the three films and the story. It was just all over the place. So, Kathleen Kennedy should have come in and said, right, this is what's going to happen. This is how you guys are going to work. You're going to have three films that are going to link together perfectly and the story's going to make sense. So, do you think she's at fault?
I mean, she's the one at the top, right? When
Yeah, yeah.
something
Buck
goes
stops with
wrong on the
her.
ship, it's the captain's responsibility. So,
Yeah, yeah.
I think
But,
so. It's
I mean,
interesting, and in the time since our last conversation, I've been, watching videos about George's notes for the sequel trilogy, his original ideas that he passed off to Disney that he says they didn't use. A
yeah,
lot of what was in his notes did wind up in that sequel trilogy in some way, shape, or form. So, I'm not convinced that if George had held on to the franchise and had made those 3 films himself, that we
yeah,
would have loved them. Not after the unnecessary changes to the original trilogy, the special editions, not after some of the messier aspects of the prequel trilogy. I'm not convinced that, if he had kept the franchise for himself, that we would have been just as receptive to his sequels because I think it would have been the same sort of reception that the prequel trilogy got
yeah,
if he
yeah,
had done it.
yeah. Moving on. What was it about Star Wars that really stood out for you?
Uh, the fact that it is not Earth centric. Like all of our great science fiction franchises have something to do with Earth, either
Yeah,
people coming to Earth, people from Earth going out in space. I mean, if you look at all of them, from Doctor
yeah,
Who to Star Trek to Planet of the Apes, everything is Earth centric. Star Wars
yeah,
is not. And yet, Star Wars has taken so many familiar elements that we know and transplanted them into a galaxy far, far away. So
yeah,
as soon as we see the first film in the first few minutes, we can get into that world. We understand that world because it is filled with so many familiar elements and so many familiar characters that we would know in real life, like Luke Skywalker, the
yeah,
farm
yeah,
boy that's dreaming to go off with his friends and have an adventure. We've known dozens of Luke Skywalkers in our lives, our
mm,
friends or relatives or whatever. So it's having something completely alien yet filling it with so many familiar elements that we immediately understand the characters.
yeah. No, I get that, and I think that's great because, like you say, there's nothing like it before, and as you've said, all the other sci-fi's, TV series or movies were like sort of like revolved around Earth, so that it was
Mhm.
totally in, like you say, in a galaxy far, far away. But now I'm finding that Star Wars is becoming too much like Earth. I mean, look, Andor has just finished season 2. I liked it for the most part, but there was elements in it that I just thought, my God, I don't want to see characters going into a corner convenience store. Do you know what I mean? I mean, yeah, they might exist, but we don't need to see them. We don't need to see that. I didn't need to see the Dead Ramiro. I don't know if have you seen it? I don't want to give any
Yes.
spoilers away.
Yeah.
You have. I didn't want
Yes.
to see Dead Ramiro sit down with I can't remember his name. Who was the guy that he was seeing? Cyril and
Mhm.
his mum. I didn't wanna see that. That was a an awful scene. I didn't like that at all. And there was just certain aspects of Andor that I just thought, You're making it too much like Earth-related sort of stuff, keep it did you
Yeah,
find that?
somewhat. I mean,
Yep.
it's a hard balance to strike in creating a world that's completely alien and yet very familiar. And if you
Yeah.
put too much of the familiar stuff in, I think I ended up watching the rest of Skeleton Crew as well. You
Yeah.
know, completely forgettable for me. But there was a
Yeah.
lot in there that was also way too familiar to our day to day lives, like kids going to school and stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a balance in a way to tell the story and keep it familiar, you keep it alien. It's a hard thing to do, I think.
But
For
they got
writing.
it right in
You
the
have to get
original
writers with a
trilogy.
special talent.
Yeah, but I mean, they got it right with the original trilogy.
Yeah, the original trilogy had a lot of action-oriented stuff in it, and it was only 3 films. When you get into telling 8-episode television series, then you have to sort of expand that story to fill that time. So you're going to have scenes that you wouldn't have in a 2-hour film.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's world building. And I thought overall the product Andor was very good. It was excellent.
Oh, yeah, yeah, it
It
was, yeah.
was it was Star Wars, like they said, it was Star Wars for adults. I know some people don't like certain aspects of that,
Yeah.
but when a franchise gets to be as old as Star Wars, it's gonna be almost 50 in a couple of it's gonna be 50 in a couple of years.
Yeah, right?
And you look
God, I
back
know.
at all
It's mad.
franchises that have been around for that long, from Batman to Star Trek to Godzilla. There's ups and downs, there's ebbs and flows. There's stuff made for kids, there's stuff made for adults. And, you have to let different creators experiment with the material along the way to see what works. And if it works, you do more. If it doesn't work, you move on, you do something else, hopefully.
Yeah. No, that's a good point, that's a good point. How important is excuse me, how important is story to you within the Star Wars universe?
You have to have a cohesive story. I think we saw in the sequel trilogy how without a cohesive story, it all falls apart. I mean, there's still plot threads from that sequel trilogy that are still dangling that they never resolved. So,
Yeah.
you have to have cohesive storytelling. It starts with the script. I mean, before when you make any movie or television show, it starts with the written word. It starts with the script. If you don't have a good script, I don't think the product's going to be any good.
Yeah. Yeah. I but the thing is, what I don't get is Disney were I mean, George Lucas himself said Star Wars is a fairy tale. It's a fairy tale. You've got wizards, you've got like swords, light swords and stuff like that, lightsabers and stuff like that,
Mhm,
different creatures, and so it is like a fairy tale, really. You got princesses.
mhm.
Disney were good at telling stories, especially fairy tales. So why did Disney get it wrong with the original trilogy? Not the original trilogy, the sequel trilogy. Like I say, have the story planned out first and then do your 3 films, but
Right, and
I
that's why
can't
they got it
believe
wrong. They
yeah,
didn't
yeah,
have the story planned out. I think
yeah,
Star Wars isn't just a fairy tale. Star Wars is a balance between that future industrial aesthetic, that grounded reality that they live in, and then you have the Force and the Jedi and the Sith.
yeah,
And those 2 things have to balance out,
yeah,
right? Han Solo has nothing to do with the Force. Luke is all about the Force, and yet those 2 work together because they balance out.
yeah, yeah. No,
I
no,
think if you
fair enough.
go one way or the other, I mean, with Andor, they went one way. They didn't have anything to do with the Force or anything like that, but they
Yeah,
had a good script, so that succeeded.
yeah.
And then the I think I haven't watched The Acolyte. I assume it's
Oh, you're
more of
missing
that.
out, you're missing out.
Am I? I
No.
think you're lying. I haven't watched The Acolyte, but I think it's more of the Force side of things,
Yeah,
and
it is,
people
it
didn't
is.
like that. So,
Look, with The Acolyte, the potential was there to do something absolutely incredible, you know, tell a story in an era of Star Wars that we hadn't seen.
mhm.
And they got it so wrong. And I'm not going to go into the reasons for that because I've already expressed that many a time.
And
So,
does it start with the writing?
but yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it does. I mean, you know, look, you get a good story. That's the most important thing. If you get a good
Mhm.
story, that hooks in the viewer. The viewer gets involved in it. They get interested in the story and stuff like that. And then with good story and good writing, you get great characters. You get great character development, all of which was missing in the Star Wars
Mhm,
sequels
mhm.
to a degree. So but there you go. So I think story is absolutely pivotal, not just for Star Wars, but for most movies and TV series.
Well, all movies and TV series, you have
Yeah,
to it has to be well written or else it's garbage.
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, some movies they can get away with not having a great story because you've got great visual effects and a lot of action and stuff like that. So the storyline's a bit flimsy. They kind of hide it behind CGI.
Yeah, but
Whereas,
those things aren't as well remembered as Star Wars. Those things come and go. You can
yeah,
have a
good
big
point.
budget mo
Yeah,
the Transformers series, big, huge films, absolute garbage scripts. The
yeah,
Bay films. I
yeah.
mean, who's really, what fandom like Star Wars has popped up around specifically the Transformers feature films? I don't think there is one.
No, true, true. I think it's a shame, but because I quite like the Transformers, and I
Mhm,
just wish they'd have done a decent job. But again, another conversation.
mhm.
Um, how important do you think the older generation of Star Wars fans are to the Star Wars franchise? When I say older generation, I mean us guys that were there from the very beginning.
Well, we're the ones that would pass it on to future generations, right? We're the ones that would hype it up and say, "Hey, you've got to see this. This is great." When the Marvel MCU Infinity Saga was going on, we made it a family event every time a new film came out. I took the entire family and we went
Yeah,
to see the new Marvel movie. We don't do that anymore, but it's very important to have the older fans as, that those are your built-in cheerleaders. Those are your built-in advocates, advertisers. They're
yeah,
the ones that are going to
yeah,
say, "Hey, there's a new Star Wars coming out. We have to go see it. Let's take the whole family and go." So yeah, they're very important.
yeah. Absolutely, because like you say, we've been there from the beginning. We've carried the torch for Star Wars for 40 plus years now.
Mhm.
And look, listen, I can understand that you need to bring in a new audience. I get that. I get that. But don't do it at the expense of the older generation of
Right,
fans
exactly.
because, friends of mine, they've said you go to events like Echo Live, which is a Star Wars convention over here, or you go to Star Wars Celebration, you take out all of the 40 plus fans, and you're not going to be left with too many fans there, I don't feel.
Mhm.
But But there you go. How important are strong female characters within Star Wars?
I mean, strong characters in general are important, and whether they're male, female, or whatever.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
yeah, I don't like to, I don't like to identify the, male, female, black, white, gay, straight, whatever. Just give me a good character. Give me a good, well
yeah,
written, well rounded character that I care about. Whether they're male, female, or whatever. If the first priority for a writer should be to write good characters, and then you find
yeah,
an actor, no matter who that actor is, to embody that character.
yeah,
And don't worry about the superficial aspects so much. Don't worry about I
yeah.
have to have a actor of this color, of this gender, of this whatever to fill this role.
It's got to be the right person.
Yeah, it's got to be the right person, no matter what they are, to embody the spirit of what that character is.
Mm. I mean, the only reason I put this question in is because of Kathleen Kennedy turning around saying, "Oh, you know, us older fans don't like strong female characters." And we grew up with Princess Leia, for goodness sake. Right, she
Right.
might not have been going around like acting like gung ho, like muscles and stuff like that, and being a butch, you know, action hero female character. That's not the definition of a strong character. George Lucas has said it himself. She had brains, she had intelligence. That they are strengths, themselves. So
Mhm.
she might not have been like ripped muscles and stuff like that, but she was a princess, then she was a general. Do you know what I mean? So she was a strong female character.
Right.
And then you had, people like Cara Dune. She was a strong female character, all action hero, wasn't she really? She had the big
Mhm.
gun and stuff like that, and she kicked ass. They kicked her out. They got rid of her. They sacked her.
Right.
So do you know what I mean? It doesn't make sense. Ahsoka Tano, although she was animated, she was that well received that they gave her a live action TV series. I
Yeah.
don't get it. Padme Amidala. she was a queen, then a senator. All strong female characters.
Mhm,
And it just really does annoy me when they come out and say things like that. It's like, "Oh, well, Rey's a strong female character." No, she wasn't. She wasn't. She was poorly written. That's not her fault. I'm not having a go at the actress for that. No one's having a go at the actress for that.
mhm.
She was just poorly written, and
Right.
that's as simple as that.
And you look back at genre franchises, we've never had a problem with strong female characters in this,
No,
we're
absolutely,
looking
yeah.
at genres, going back to the '70s, I used to watch Wonder Woman, I used to watch
Yeah,
The Bionic Woman. In
yeah.
the '80s, Ellen Ripley from Aliens and Sarah Connor from Terminator,
Oh,
fantastic
yeah,
characters brought to life
yeah,
by fantastic actresses. And then getting into the '90s television, you have Buffy the Vampire Slayer and
yeah,
Xena Warrior Princess and all the rest. Fans don't have a problem with female characters. We want well-written female characters that
yeah,
we can admire and we can cheer for.
yeah. No,
I
absolutely,
know I don't think
absolutely.
Rey was very well written. She was sort of a I don't know, she was sort of an empty shell of a character, no fault of Daisy Ridley, of course.
No,
She's
absolutely
just
not.
she's just working by the script, but, she didn't go
Well,
on
look,
the hero's journey that Luke did,
yeah.
right? She was just good at the Force from the beginning.
Yeah,
Never
exactly. So there was no character development there. You didn't see
Right,
her training, you didn't see her learn and stuff like that. But
right.
another thing that annoys me, I've mentioned him before, John Boyega. Eh, you know, we saw posters when The Force Awakens come up with him when The Force Awakens came out with him holding a lightsaber. I
Mhm,
mean, that looked pretty awesome. He
mhm.
was a stormtrooper. He defected, the First Order. That would have been a great storyline. They never followed that up.
Right,
They
yeah.
never followed that up.
Finn was done dirty.
Yeah,
In
exactly.
The Last Jedi, he was made into a comedy sidekick.
Yeah,
That's not the fault of the fans, that's the fault of the writers,
exactly.
you know?
But, for him to come out and attack the fans and saying that, Star Wars is whitest. Come on. I mean,
Yeah, who
we've had
knows?
some great black characters. Lando Calrissian was a great, but we're not allowed to say that. We can't say that because he said it's like dropping little sprinkles of chocolate chip cookies in the cookie dough. They're the best parts of the cookie, the chocolate chip cookies. Uh, Mace Windu. I mean, for crying out loud, he was the most kick-ass Jedi you've ever seen.
Mhm.
Awesome
And
character.
the
So I
only
just
one with a purple lightsaber.
exactly. And Samuel L. Jackson's a great actor, very well
Yeah.
liked. Lando Calrissian, again, a great actor, very well
Mhm,
liked. Carl Weathers in Mandalorian.
mhm,
What a great actor he is.
mhm.
People like his character. I don't get why these people have got to come out and say this utter tripe, and attack the fans. I just can't get me
Yeah,
around
who
it.
knows? Maybe they're listening to the wrong voices, maybe they're, too hung up on the negative effect of social media, I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. No, no, fair enough, fair enough. How important is it for Star Wars to be inclusive?
Inclusive how? You mean to represent all people, all things,
Yes.
all colors? I
Yes,
mean,
all
yeah,
all all people, all colors, all
yeah,
genders, all
that's yeah,
identities.
fine. Everything should be like that, shouldn't it?
Well, yeah,
Again,
but I
just write me a good character, just write me a good story. I
yeah,
don't care what color they are, what gender they are, who they love, what they do on their off time, I don't care. Write me a good character.
yeah,
That's all I want.
yeah. And I think when a TV company leads with it's gonna be the most gayest Star Wars or the actor's gay or they're
Right.
lesbian or whatever.
Don't worry about box checking after you've developed these great characters.
Yeah, yeah. You
And then
shouldn't
go
lead with that.
back
You should lead with
Yeah,
the story.
right. Lead with the story, lead with the characters, then go back and, like, when you're in the casting phase, like I said, check your boxes, find the best person to embody that character.
Yeah,
If all you've got for a character is, well, this is going to be, some, you know, certain color, certain gender, whatever, and that's, the first one of its kind or whatever, I don't care. Just
it doesn't
show
bother
me
me either.
show me the good character.
I don't think it bothers most people.
No.
All people want is, like you say, a great story, a
Mhm.
well-written, thought out story that makes sense, that people can get, oh, I can't remember the word, can get oh, what's the word? Why am I having a brain fart at the moment? Get invested in. They can
Yes.
invest in it. and
Right.
then you can get the great characters, you can get great character development and stuff like that, and it like I say, it doesn't matter. Don't lead with the fact that your main character is gay. What I don't care, no one cares.
Mhm.
It you know, but anyway, there you go. Last question. Overall, what makes Star Wars great?
Ooh, what makes Star Wars great? I think it's like I said, its uniqueness in its concept. I think the effect it has on people, whether you watch the original trilogy, and if you like the prequel trilogy, that's fine. If you like the sequel trilogy, that's fine. If you only like The
Yeah,
Mandalorian, that's fine. My daughter doesn't watch Star Wars, but she loved The Mandalorian because Baby Yoda. No
fair
matter
enough.
what you like at Star Wars, that's if
Yeah.
that's what makes it great for you, then that's fine.
Okay, okay.
I mean,
Do you
it's a timeless franchise. It's a timeless story, good versus evil, the
Yeah.
hero's journey, all that speaks to a lot of people.
It's a simple story, good versus
Right,
evil, isn't it, in the
right,
hero's journey? Do
right.
you
It's the
think
most
they've
basic story we have.
overcomplicated it? Yeah, do you think they've overcomplicated it?
I mean, when you're trying to expand the universe, when you're trying to make so many films, TV shows, get more people invested, yeah, you're going to veer off on different paths and do different things. You know, that's fine. It doesn't mean it's overcomplicated, but as we've said, ad nauseum in this video, it's got to be good. It's got to be a good script. It's got to be good storytelling.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
think the oversaturation of poorly produced product is the problem right now. I don't
yeah.
think it would never be oversaturated if it was good. People will always watch something good. They're not going to see something that's really good and say, Of course, saying that, I don't think Andor did all that great with the viewing numbers, even though that was really good. But that might be an effect of poor product coming before that, and people just
Yeah,
checking out before that came along.
yeah, 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 and I think, you're right. I think a lot of people have checked out of Star Wars, and I think a lot of people have cancelled their Disney Plus subscription as well,
Mhm.
so you're gonna be losing viewers, so it's the viewing numbers aren't gonna be, overly
I
high.
mean, I think a lot of people where I'm at with Star Wars right now, which is sort of hinging on ambivalence. If you tell me a new
Yeah,
Star Wars project is coming out, I'm like, okay, fine. I'm not going to get
yeah,
excited.
yeah.
I'm not going to go make a video saying, "Oh, this is the worst thing ever," based on the trailer. I just don't care. If it comes out and it seems like it's good, I'll watch it. If it's not, I'm not going to watch it. There are several
No,
Star
no,
Wars
yeah.
projects that Disney has done that I just haven't watched. I
No,
haven't felt
because
the need to watch them.
because there's so much Star Wars, you can choose which Star Wars you like and don't like, and which ones you will watch and which ones you won't watch. It doesn't make you any less of a Star Wars fan.
Mhm.
Now, just quickly before we go, the original trilogy had such an impact on a generation. Star Wars was absolutely everywhere. You had the action figures, you had your coloring books, you had your cereal boxes, you had um your trading cards,
Mhm.
your bed sheets, your pajamas, your wallpaper, your curtains. It was everywhere. Do you think that there will ever be a time where we get a franchise or a movie that has that impact on a generation as the same impact as Star Wars had on our generation?
No. No,
No?
not with the current entertainment landscape where everything is so spread out and oversaturated and there's just millions of hours of content available on your phone.
Yeah,
Back when Star Wars first came out, there wasn't even home media. There was no VHS, never mind DVD, never mind streaming, never mind YouTube. Movies back then were an event. And
yeah,
even on television, there was a limited number of networks. So Star Wars became an event. When you went to see Star Wars, it may be the only time you'd see it ever because we didn't know that home video was going to come along at some point. You'd have to wait till one of the networks bought it and showed it on TV maybe once a year, like they did with the Wizard of Oz.
yeah,
That became an event when I was a kid because Wizard of Oz would only be shown once a year on television, and you had to see it that at that time, or else you'd
yeah,
have to wait another year. So that sort of zeitgeist with entertainment that's gone away. Even the stuff we had in the '80s with the cartoons and the toy lines, 'cause that synergy between them, That's also
Yeah,
gone away. So I don't think, unless things drastically change, I don't think we're going to see something like that ever again. I mean, the last thing that really had an effect was, I think, Harry Potter.
yeah.
The Harry Potter franchise really caught a lot of people, and that became something big, and they've got a theme park now. But I don't know if that was even as big as the original Star Wars when it came out.
No, it's interesting. Interesting thoughts. Goji, we have come to the end of the conversation. Thank you very much. I do apologize once again for having to call you back on to to
That's fine.
to go over it again. But yeah, awesome. Thank you very much. Where can people find you on social media?
Gojitron on Instagram and Gojitron on YouTube. And right now, in the wake of this conversation, I'm working on actually a Star Wars video
Oh,
that I should
okay.
have ready to go. Whenever you post this, I'll post my video after that and sort of tie the two together.
Okay, nice one. Appreciate that. I will put your social media links in the description below. Once again, Goji, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you. Thank you very much. And for those
You
of
as
you
well.
who have watched and stayed to the end, very much do appreciate it. Thank you. Take care, stay safe, and we shall see you in the next video. Bye for now.
May the force be with you.
Absolutely. Always.